Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So today I'd like to speak about the challenge of anger and the power of what we call the perfections in practice. But I'd like to start by orienting ourselves to who we're practicing for. And I'm wondering if there's anyone or anything for which you would like to dedicate your practice today. And I'll start out by just saying to our teachers, the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, transmission from Bodhidharma to China, and Eihei Dogen Zenji and Keizan Zenji to Japan. And Shogaku Shunryu, Suzuki Roshi, and other teachers from Japan to the US. And so how it came to us through time, and also to everyone, including people suffering from war and calamities of all kinds. Anyone else who needs to be included in this dedication, which I'd like to give at the beginning of lecture instead of the end. You can say it out, the name out loud, or you can think it yourself. You don't have to expose yourself by speaking in public if you don't want. But what I'm going to do is say 1, 2, 3, and then we can each say a name, and then no one will be able to tell it's you. Okay, and even people online are completely welcome to join, either by saying it or by the chat. Okay? Get ready. 1, 2, 3. Sangha. Thank you. So as I said, today I'd like to speak about the challenge of anger. And the central question, which Dave and I are teaching about today, and which I'm lecturing about from the point of view of the tradition, the central question is, how does Zen practice train us to let go of our relational barriers between us and the world, and whatever is happening between others or the world and us? It's kind of a central question for us right now. How do we transform barriers or work through barriers to find intimacy, peace, health? And what of these practices, these traditional Zen practices, directly help us to live in ways that are founded on connection, altruism, loving kindness, particularly in times of conflict or change? So I want to start with the traditional Buddhist understanding of anger, because anger is an emotion that's difficult for us to practice with many times, because it gives rise to adrenaline, which gives rise to quick action. And so it's hard to kind of catch up with anger when we feel it, because it tends to separate us from what's happening and how we can respond, and push us into the realm of protection, avoidance, or rejection. So that's why I chose anger. So the traditional Buddhist understanding is that there's 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. So desire, aversion, and confusion, and our reactions: getting, pushing, or paralysis. delusion. Okay, and so of the three, anger is considered to be the most dangerous, in that one moment of anger is traditionally understood to destroy a lifetime of intimacy or a lifetime of practice. I don't know if you've experienced this in your own life, where someone starts with you always, or you never, and it explodes, and then something happens, and then suddenly the relationship is very much hurt. And that's explosive nature of anger is what the Buddha was talking about. And in the early teaching of the Buddha, he gave some advice, which I have been reciting for over 50 years, but which I had personally found difficult to really understand or work with until I studied it more and studied the teachings across the years, which helped me understand the teaching of the Buddha. So I'll tell you about this teaching, which is from some of the Buddha's earliest teachings. And this translation of this work, the Dhammapada, is by my ordination brother, Gil Fronsdal. And so it's fresh and easy to understand. So you can find this in the chapter in the Dhammapada, Buddha's earliest teachings on anger. He says, "The one who keeps anger in check as it arises, as one would a careening chariot, I call a charioteer. Others are merely rein holders, holders of the reins. Conquer anger with non-anger. Conquer wickedness with goodness. Conquer stinginess with giving. And a liar with truth." So again, it says, "The one who keeps anger in check as it arises, as one would a careening chariot, I call a charioteer, while others are merely rein holders. Conquer anger with non-anger. Conquer wickedness with goodness. Conquer stinginess with giving, and a liar with truth." So to conquer anger, the Buddha continues, restrain ourselves when it arises. Restrain the arising of the demonstration of anger in body, speech, and mind. So we let go of our misconducts and practice good conduct instead. But in actual fact, when someone is telling me that I always or that I never, I couldn't understand how to apply this teaching, because as soon as they said you always or you never, the tiger would arise really fast and start attacking before I knew what I was doing. So it seemed impossible to be able to restrain that, and I couldn't understand what that meant in actual life. I couldn't understand because I wasn't quick enough to, there was no time in between the arising of anger and acting it out. Especially since I was one of the early feminists, and I marched, and we used our anger in those marches for chanting and for what we thought was justice. And there were other causes that I marched for at that time. And I started marching when I was about 15 years old. But then by the time I was 16 years old, I was really, really tired. And I thought, oh no, I can't do this anymore. I have to stop working for justice. I can't do this, it's going to kill me. It took a long time for me to have that thought, maybe about another 5 years. But that's when that thought started, really soon. And then someone handed me once a Xerox. I looked at the Xerox. It was called The Miracle of Being Awake. And it was by Thich Nhat Hanh. And The Miracle of Being Awake consisted of 2 of Buddha's sutras. One was the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, and the other one was the Anapanasati Sutta. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the sutra on exploring and understanding the breath. And so then that was the start of an exploration into what anger is, how it arises, what can I do with it, body, speech, and mind. But then, shortly after I discovered that those sutras and the teaching of Thich Nhat Hanh, who, by the way, went on to help young people have a voice in Washington, D.C., and to end the American war in Vietnam. That's why how he happened to receive the Nobel Peace Prize and become a world-honored poet and teacher. When I was studying him and how he came off, he did seem to put the Buddha's teachings into action. So when anger arose in him, he would speak softly and smile. And I thought, I could never do that. It's too sweet for me. And I didn't realize that sweetness that he had and demonstrated came forth from tremendous personal and group suffering. I didn't see how that could happen. And I could go into that more about what happened with me and why I couldn't, but I'm not going to. Just imagine seeing an example like Thich Nhat Hanh and thinking, oh, that's too sweet for me, I can't do that. So rejecting it. So basically, if you go back into that feeling, there's a kind of an anger that this is a standard I could never achieve, and there's a kind of rejection of the teaching behind that feeling of I could never do that. It's too sweet for me. But then came ordination. So some of us in this room were ordained in 1981 and 1982. And that was a pretty long time ago. And the precept that we received at that time about anger was not harboring ill will, not harboring ill will. So that's interesting because it doesn't say don't get angry. It says don't harbor ill will. Once you have the feeling of anger, what do you do or what don't you do with it? And so fast forward to years and years and years of study after ordination, and I came across some of the teachings in the Heroic March scripture, which is, it's a text that's mentioned in some of our koan collections, some of our public cases on how people behave when they're practicing. And so the training modes from this sutra, the Heroic March scripture, the Samdhinirmochana Mahayana Sutra, talks about perfection. And perfection doesn't mean like perfectionism. Perfection means finding a bigger way to respond instead of react. That's based on our basic feeling of wanting to be awake for the benefit of all beings. So if we act that way and not the way that's just kind of we're being pushed and bullied by our emotions and our habits. So when we have habitual reactions to our emotions, it's a form of kind of bullying from our past to make us react in particular ways. But when we find out that there's more options of how to behave in situations such as anger, we transcend those habits and preconceptions about how to behave. And we are free to behave in ways that benefit ourselves and others. And that's why they're called perfections. not perfectionism, not am I right, but is my action necessary? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it beneficial? So the Samdhinirmochana Sutra, this sutra called the Heroic March, dun, da, 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 here I come to save the day, mighty mouse is on the way. So it's like, I felt like Mighty Mouse, you know? It's a very, very small creature that's being asked to save the day somehow, to lift a building with a finger or to, you know, face a bunch of wolves or whatever. I felt like that when I first started to practice, and sometimes I still do. But what freed me up from that feeling of inadequacy in responding instead of reacting was this description in the Heroic March scripture of what this kind of courage or heroism actually is. Talking about the perfections as a basis of training, a basis of training. So a way to train ourselves to live from our deepest intention instead of out of habit or autopilot. So it's in a chapter of the Heroic March scripture that is devoted to Avalokiteshvara. In other words, devoted to the personification of compassion or kindness, generosity, altruism. And so the chapter is set up as a series of questions from the embodiment of compassion to the Buddha, whose awakeness personified or embodied. And this sutra teaches us a way to train in not harboring ill will. And it's simple. It's not easy, it's simple. When anger arises, we practice. When anger arises, we practice. It doesn't mean that we have to attain complete renunciation, which was my assumption, not the truth about what the Buddha taught. So when anger arises, we practice benefiting ourselves, the subject of our anger, and the space between and around ourself and the other, or the perceived other. So that we, the one or the thing that we're angry at, and the space in between and all around becomes the field of practice. And we practice. We vow, we decide, we determine, we resolve, and we resource ourselves to practice. So the paramitas, I'll just list them and say which ones I want to focus on about anger. That's okay. The paramitas, or the perfections, here's the list. Get ready. The first one is generosity or giving. Generosity or giving. A feeling of giving. So whether it's material goods or donations, whether it's a gift of the truth or the teaching, or a gift of support and fearlessness, whether it's any of those kinds of gifts, it adds a drop of goodness to the ocean of goodness, the ocean of resources that is the world. So it overcomes non-goodness by putting goodness out there. Giving builds virtue. It builds the capacity for virtue because we have somebody else's welfare in mind. And one act of giving, no matter how small, benefits everyone by enriching and nourishing the space in which we all live, by allowing for the possibility of trust in the space in which we all live. Generosity is the first one. Ethics or discipline is the second one. So basically, ethics in the field of anger means that we practice not impoverishing someone else or the space between us. We practice not harming someone who's the subject of our anger or the space between us. We practice not scorning or ignoring someone we're angry with or the space between us. All of those things become fields for practice, and that is ethics for the purpose of non-anger. And we practice tolerance. You know, online you can look up anger and it says visualize them as a baby or as a toddler. Have you ever seen that online? Or it says, take 3 breaths, walk around the block. Those are things that you can see online to do when you're angry. But the point is that with tolerance, we can develop some space between the impulse to act out of fear or rejection and the actual action that we do. And in the space, we can consider what is our real priority. The space gives us time to consider what's our real priority? What kind of person do I want to be? And then act from there. So basically what it does, what that space of tolerance does, is to help us prioritize, it's a tool to help us prioritize practice over small-minded or selfish habits that come from fear, or especially fear of one's own impoverishment, harm, or scorn. And so it has the function of allowing us to be steady when we're insulted or hurt. Doesn't mean that we have to ignore being insulted or hurt. We still have our boundaries. But it helps us stay in that space to consider our best response, and that is patience. So it helps us build a wider view, because as we're steady, as we breathe, as the adrenaline begins to cool down, we can admit other possibilities besides the ones that habit reveals to us. So far we've looked at generosity, ethics, and patience as practices to do with anger. And what those 3 hold in common is that there's a certain amount of effort that we have to put forward, especially at the beginning, especially when we're first trying to study how to change a habit of reactivity. It takes effort to, I don't know if you've ever seen a cartoon where someone gets angry and their head blows up. So it takes effort at first to tamp that down and to go, no, I'm just going to do 3 breaths, or I'm just going to walk around the block, or I'm just going to try to see a slightly wider view. It takes effort. And as we sustain a long, steady, uninterrupted practice, the level of effort decreases, and it becomes more who we are and how we really are tending to respond. We can change our life and the life of those of others around us. So generosity, ethics, and patience allow us to absorb the teaching of the Buddha. It takes effort to do that, But again, the teaching of the Buddha is the one who keeps anger in check as it arises, as one would a careening chariot, I call a charioteer. Others are merely rein holders. Conquer anger with non-anger. Okay, Shakespeare talks about this. They who have the power to hurt and would do none, who do not do the thing they most do show, who moving others are themselves as stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow. They are the lords and owners of their faces. They harbor nature's riches from expense. They rightly do inherit heaven's graces. Others are stewards of their excellence. Okay? So, anyway, this is known by humans. Okay? So, I just want to talk about, I just want to do a little ad for the impact of practicing generosity, ethics, and patience, and why it pays to spend that effort, especially at the beginning, and to sustain it for a long time. So this is the ad, okay? I haven't taken time to, make a video out of it or write a fancy script, but I'll just read a list of the immediate advantages that are part of the developing the habit of practicing instead of the habit of reacting. So situations in which one would normally be angry, sad, or scared begin to develop some sense of texture as spaces of great resource. Okay? And there are actually chants to help us do this, like the Enmei Juku Kanon Gyo, the Shosai Myo Kichijo Durani, help us resource ourselves with by calling on compassion or by burning through the hindrances that would otherwise push us around. So situations in which we would normally be angry, sad, or scared begin to have texture so that we can have a wider view of them. And they give space for intimacy because it's not constantly being undercut with pointed barbs or screaming and that kind of thing. So it means that our future improves with practice. There's good selfish reasons to practice instead of being pushed around by anger. And also we can skillfully reduce the number and power that the place that enemies hold in our life by not creating enemies or by understanding more about our enemies. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama had this wonderful phrase called, "My friend, the enemy." Okay, so let's check that out. We lose the tendency to disagree or express dissent because it's exciting to do so. We can enjoy our inner and outer relationships. We can develop more intimacy if we're not mad at ourselves or other people in ways that act it out and reinforce it. We can experience our own sense of joyfulness, peace, and power by practicing it without becoming attached to it. We reduce harm to ourselves, the harm we do ourselves when we think those thoughts and act on them, as well as the harm to others. And our actions become examples of practice for ourselves and others. So the Yoga Sutras talks about it. It says that people who practice friendliness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, that in their presence, enmity drops, aggression drops. So let's see, before I close with a quote by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I'd like to suggest that you kind of get yourself comfortable so that you could hear it instead of focusing on pain. Okay, so bring yourself into some connection with the earth through your chair, through your sit bones and feet, or through the sit bones and the action away from the earth in the cross-legged posture. So develop a posture right now in which the words touch your body and your mind. Okay, you breathing? So what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said in this book called Kindness, Clarity, and Insight. There's a chapter called Altruism and the Six Perfections, which is about how kindness, which results in non-anger, is expressed through these perfections, particularly generosity, patience, ethics and patience that we're focusing on today, and the effort that underlies them. So what he says is, altruism is transformed to action. Altruism, our basic intention to be kind, to help people, is transformed into action. We engage in practicing the six perfections: giving, ethics, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. There are three types of giving: the giving of resources, of one's own body, and of the roots of virtue. It is the most difficult to give away your own roots of virtue, and it is also the most important. When you have a strong sense of giving and dedicating to others your roots of virtue, you no longer seek reward for yourself. Even though mere giving can be done by those seeking their own benefit, a bodhisattva's giving, an awakening being's giving, is not involved in selfishness at all. Altruism is transformed into action. You engage in practicing the perfections. Giving is the root of the perfections. Giving resources, giving one's own body, one's own self, giving the roots of virtue, directly or through example. It's the most difficult to give away our own roots of virtue, not to hold on to our own attainments. It's also the most important. When you have a strong sense of giving and dedicating to others your roots of virtue, you no longer seek for any reward for yourself. Even though mere giving can be done by those seeking their own benefit, a bodhisattva's giving is not involved in selfishness at all. So paramitas are often seen as stages of Buddhist practice. But when we work with the anger in this wider way, it's heart practice or nourishment. It's effort as mind practice or bravery that build interpersonal spaces of nourishment and bravery, nourishment and courage that even stronger than the discomfort of conflict and change. It's okay? Is it enough? Can we focus on our own questions, our own, what we need to know or to study about the space of nourishment and courage in the midst of conflict and change? Okay, so what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is to do the chant to end the lecture. And so if you need to stand up, to move around, to use the bathroom, or to go, you're welcome to do that. But if you want to stay and talk about the challenge of anger and the power of the paramitas, I'm here, and also I'll invite Dave to come up and contribute, if that's okay. So shall we do that? Is that how we?
You want to stand up and stretch now?
Well, what if we do the chant and then stand up and stretch? Would that be okay?
It's okay with me.
So he knows the form. He's the head of the meditation
It's not
hall.
the usual form, but
Well, what would you really? What would be the usual form? That and is it too much of a departure?
we usually do the Q&A and then the chant at the very end.
Okay. Well, just for accessibility, I'd like to give us a seventh inning stretch. So what if we do the chant first and then the seventh inning stretch and the questions? Please forgive my departing from the form. Okay?
We'll let it go this time.
Is that okay with you all? Okay, let's do this. May our intention equally extend into every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's ways unsurpassable. I vow to become it. So, if you wish to join me in the three bows, you can do a seated bow. And let's dedicate it to the people who we wanted to dedicate at the very beginning of the lecture. We can understand that our questions and discussion are also a form of dedication. Okay? Okay. You want to invite people to take a stretch and collect for Q&A?
Yes, please stand up and stretch. Open up your arms wide. If you want to depart, this is a good time to do it. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome to stay.
Okay. Dave, would you like to bring it, or actually here?
Do you want to sit side by side here, or do you
Is the
want to-
Zafu okay with you, or do you need a chair?
Sure.
Chair, okay. So we need a couple chairs, one for Dave and one for me.
Oh, thanks. I don't know if I'll say anything
Okay?
worth hearing.
Any more
by
chairs?
everybody.
Oh, okay. Let's take a zabuton and just put it on the edge like this, okay? We'll skip the chair. Oh, you got a chair?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think each of us in a chair side by side, is that okay?
Each of us in a chair side by side is fine. Thank you so much. Okay, so gather round if you want to ask questions or make comments about this. You're welcome to come on this side of the Zendo. Have a seat. Yeah, why don't you just sit around here somewhere, because we don't usually cross the middle. It's a ritual space. So it's okay, just bring a chair right here.
Can I introduce myself on
We
this start?
will in a second. So thank you. Let's have a seat. Come on over.
If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone over.
Okay, and let's just have a little bit of an introduction. So Dave, would you like to introduce, I'll introduce myself and you can introduce yourself.
Okay.
Okay? So I am Shosan Victoria Austin, priest here.
And I'm Dave Rico. I'm a psychotherapist and student and friend of Vicky. And I'm here to speak about the psychological features of how we work with conflict and anger. And Vicky will be talking about mainly about the Buddhist practice. And this afternoon from 2 to 5, we're going to be next door in the conference center offering a workshop, and you're all welcome to attend.
Thanks. And to attend, of course, you have to register, and we'll figure it out. Okay? But if the finances of attending a workshop are an issue, please let us know, and we'll figure it out.
So
Okay.
we have about 15 minutes for Q&A right now.
15 minutes for Q&A, comments, anything online or in person you'd like to discuss.
I loved your talk.
I appreciate your insightful presentation. And as you can tell, I have a stutter, so it will take me longer to complete a sentence. Could you speak about the role of compassion and also the role of mindfulness in one, keeping anger at bay in the first place, and two, allowing that pause to stop anger from escalating. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for speaking. And what I want to say is I'm a survivor of multiple traumatic brain injury, so I've had to live through expressive aphasia, where the impulse to speak and the act of speaking are two different activities. So that pause that you just experienced and that we all just experienced with you is neurologically and spiritually the same pause. You already have so much experience with this, so you could answer this question. So, you have the impulse, or I'll talk about my own experience. I had the impulse to speak. I can make the thought, And then when I can't actually express the thought, or couldn't, because I've kind of graduated from that level of hindrance, physical and neurological hindrance, through the practice of patience. So through the practice of patience, the pause actually changed. And I developed new connections to make that happen in a peaceful and quiet way, which allowed me to learn how to speak again. But I'm talking about 15 years of yogic practice to do that. So, and not just yogic practice, of course, the medical profession was highly, deeply, and strongly and persistently involved. So I think the first thing is that you have the intention and you know how to use it. You already know how to use it. For people who aren't gifted with physical, physiological, or neurological hindrance in expressing ourselves, this might take longer to learn. It might take longer than 15 years. Because you actually have to give yourself a hindrance. So back before the expressive aphasia, years before it, I actually sterilized a pebble and put it into my mouth and kept it there for 6 weeks whenever I was awake to learn how to allow that pause. And because it was physically difficult to speak, my habit of quick reactivity changed. I need the services of a psychologist to help me understand this. I wonder if you could speak to this issue, Dave.
Well, it sounded like you turned it into a practice, and that really helped you. Also, you weren't embarrassed by yourself?
Well, it's not that I wasn't embarrassed.
Well, you
or
didn't have to be
frustrated.
embarrassed.
Yeah.
What I love about this whole idea of bringing the first 3 paramitas into the topic of anger is that that each of them, the generosity, the ethical integrity, and the patience, provide a container in which your anger can happen. Instead of your anger coming from any kind of malice or will to win or to be right or to put someone down, when it comes from how can I be generous, patient, and have ethical integrity while I present my anger, the whole thing changes, and you start to realize that everything about our psyche can be placed into the context of Buddhist practice. This is the most wonderful thing I found out when I turned to Buddhism. That no longer does any experience have to be just itself. It now can be placed into a context wherein I act with more integrity, more giving, more patience. So that's a wonderful thing I appreciated from the talk.
And what it turns out, thank you, and what it turns out is that when you place it into that context, the experience becomes more itself, not less. And you become more yourself and not less.
Yeah, it's an enrichment.
Yeah. That we're more free to have the authentic experience because we're not pushed into reaction. So, thank you.
It also helps you trust your feeling, because most of us don't trust our anger. We think we're going to go out of control. We're going to overdo it. Or worse, we think the other person won't get it, and we're going to have to keep hitting him over the head with it. But when it's okay with you just to express it in the context of your practice, there's no leftover.
Thank you.
We have a question online from Paula. Paula, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think it's a great segue to my question, what you just expressed, which is I was drawn to this Dharma talk because I'm trying to learn to actually express my anger. I feel like I've spent a long time being afraid of it and sort of suppressing it. So I was wondering if either of you had any words of wisdom or encouragement for trusting the feeling, as you said, Dave.
May I respond and just give people a little bit of background? Paula is currently serving as the head monk or the head student at All Beings Zen Sangha in Washington, D.C.
Actually, this is a different Paula.
Oh,
That's
different
not-
Paula, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Darn, I thought you were Paula because that was her question too. But so Paula, sorry to misidentify you,
That's all right.
but I'm wondering also what cultural pressures or gender pressures there sometimes are to not express anger. You know, so knowing what those pressures are from our past helps us understand how to practice with them now.
And that it wouldn't be that you're repressing anger. It's just that there are times when it's not really appropriate. Does that fit with what you brought up?
Yeah, Paula, is this
Yeah.
is this helping? You want say a little bit more because this how to express anger for me has to do with the messages that anger is giving us. So to know what to express, we have to understand how anger has evolved over millions of years to give us messages about what we need, what our boundaries are, and what means respect to us. So once again, I apologize for misnaming you as the other Paula, and I won't do it again.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. It came about because I was in a class with the other Paula a little bit before, so I had her on my mind already. So I had a preconception that that was the person I was speaking to, and that's why I won't do it again, because I'll drop that preconception and ask instead of stating.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So needs, boundaries, and respect. So first we have to learn to actually acknowledge or say, anger is coming up in me. I'm angry. Without adding stuff to it, which is really hard. We have to know what triggered the anger. When you promise that you will be there at 2 o'clock and you're not there till 5 o'clock, and I know it's my only chance to see you, and so I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. I feel angry. So you have to be able to say that without adding stuff to it. You have to know when, what the feeling is. And then you have to know, what do I need? What are my boundaries? What would be respectful to me? So when you make a request. When you make an appointment with me and you can't keep it, could you please let me know when you will be there? Or respect. This is the 3rd time in 1 week that I've waited for you in this way. I feel unacknowledged. Or boundaries. From now on, this is the 3rd time this has happened this week, and from now on, to keep my own sense of my day, I'm going to set a limit of 15 minutes on the amount of time I'm going to wait. Okay? And if you can say those things and take care of yourself, you have expressed the anger, but you haven't pushed over the gooiness or attachment of the anger into the space in between. Is it okay?
Yeah. Anger is described in the dictionary with just 4 words. Displeasure at a perceived injustice. Displeasure at perceived injustice. You're thinking it's unfair to make someone wait from 2 to 5. That's your perceived sense of something happened that's unfair. And then when you said what you said, you simply expressed the displeasure without blaming, without ill will, and without the plan to retaliate. All of those are not part of anger. All of those are part of aggression.
If you repeat it again.
Anger is not aggression when you come from it within the container of our practice. Many of us were brought up with angry parents who came at us. They may have hit us, they may have scared us, they may have blamed us, put us down. None of that was part of actual anger. Anger is expressing, communicating our displeasure at what we felt was unfair.
Without.
Even on a psychological level, anger becomes healthier, even without bringing Buddhism into it at all. And all these other add-ons, you're wrong, you're bad, I'll get back at you, how dare you, all of that is the result of being triggered in a way that put you out of control. In real anger, you're always in control. Sounds just like what Vicky said to the person who kept her waiting that long. Does this make sense to everybody?
So non-retaliation. Don't let adrenaline push you into aggression.
Yeah.
Or us. So how are we doing on time? Do we have time for that one more question?
We don't.
We don't?
But this could be continued in the conference center during tea and cookies, if you like, which is imminent.
Yes, well,
What kind of cookies?
I don't know the answer to that question. Good, delicious cookies.
Okay. And I think they're gluten-free. So.
yeah, and I just wanted to say we're very open to your questions, so please approach us in the other place.
Okay.
Do you want to do an exit and have everybody else exit, or do you want to all leave together now?
Well, I think what I'd like to do is exit, and then very quickly everyone else can exit so that I can bow to people as they go.
Sounds good.
Would that be okay? Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presence and practice. To be continued.
And please
Thank you.
join us this afternoon from 2 to 5. You can sign up. Where do they sign up?
On the website.
Yeah, just sign up on your phone, and we'd love to have you.
sfzc.org, look at the calendar, press the button. Okay? If you can't afford it, let us know.